Welcome back to the Sarcastic Traveller's Guide, the channel that makes your travel dreams feel more like nightmares, but in a fun way. Today, we're jetting off to Paris, the city of lights, where romance, art, and overpriced croissants await. Ready to blend in with the Parisians and navigate the world's most visited city without losing your cool. Let's dive in. First things first, if you want to survive Paris, you need to master the art of looking like you belong. Parisians are known for their chic style, so leave your touristy sneakers and fanny packs at home. Instead, embrace the monochrome wardrobe and perfect your indifferent expression. You're not just visiting Paris, you live here. Or at least, that's what you want everyone to think. Pro tip, practice saying bonjour and merci with a casual nod. Even if you butcher the accent, they'll appreciate the effort, or at least they'll pretend to. And remember, when in doubt, just look slightly annoyed. It's the Parisian way. Need an extra tip? Carry a book. Preferably something intellectual and in French, of course. Even if you can't read a word of it, just holding it makes you look more cultured. Bonus points if you're sitting in a park, looking pensive while flipping through pages. After all, it's not about reading, it's about the aesthetic. Let's talk landmarks. You can't visit Paris without seeing the Eiffel Tower, even if it's just to say you've done it. Yes, it's cliche and yes, it's crowded, but you're not leaving without that obligatory selfie. The real question is, do you want to be one of those tourists who waits in line for hours to go up? Or are you fine with admiring it from the ground, like the true Parisian wannabe you are? Here's a tip. Skip the elevator and take the stairs if you're feeling brave. It's cheaper and you'll get to brag about your fitness later. Plus the view from the top, totally worth the sweat. Just don't drop your phone while trying to get that perfect shot. And if you're really trying to avoid the tourist crowds, visit the Eiffel Tower at night. Not only is it beautifully lit up, but the crowds are thinner and the atmosphere is more magical. Just don't be surprised if you find yourself surrounded by couples proposing left and right. Love is in the air, and apparently so are cheesy proposals. Next up, the Louvre. The world's most famous museum and home to the Mona Lisa. And yes, she's just as small and underwhelming as everyone says. But that doesn't stop millions of tourists from jostling to get a glimpse of her every year. Pro tip, if you're here just for the Mona Lisa, head straight there as soon as the museum opens. Take your obligatory photo over the heads of 100 other tourists, then get out and explore the rest of the museum. Or, just skip the Louvre altogether and pretend you went. Because honestly, who's gonna know? Feeling adventurous? Try navigating the Louvre's lesser-known wings. You might actually find some peace and quiet while you pretend to appreciate art you've never heard of. And hey, who knows? You might stumble upon a new favourite piece, or at least a spot to sit down and rest your tired feet. Now let's talk food. Paris is all about the cafe culture. Sitting at a sidewalk cafe, sipping espresso, and people watching like it's a competitive sport. And yes, you're going to eat your body weight in croissants because it's Paris, and that's what you do. A word of advice, don't order anything to go. Parisians don't rush their food, and neither should you. Take your time, savour that flaky pastry, and pretend you're pondering something deep and philosophical. And if you really want to fit in, order a simple espresso. None of that fancy latte nonsense. Parisians drink their coffee strong and black, just like their sense of humour. Need a break from croissants? Try a pain au chocolat or a tarte au citron. The French are masters of pastry, so you really can't go wrong. Just make sure you enjoy every bite with a look of quiet satisfaction, as if you've just discovered the meaning of life in a butter-laden pastry. Let's be honest, the Champs-Élysées is a glorified shopping street, and the Arc de Triomphe is an overgrown traffic circle. But you're still going to visit them. Why? Because it's Paris, and that's what tourists do. But don't worry, we won't judge you. Here's a tip. Instead of spending a fortune at the designer stores, grab a macaron from La Durée and enjoy the walk. And if you're feeling adventurous, brave the traffic to climb the Arc de Triomphe. The view from the top is one of the best in Paris, and you'll get to see just how chaotic Parisian drivers really are. Not feeling up to the climb? No worries. Just stand at the base, look up and nod thoughtfully. That's enough to tick it off your bucket list. And as for the Champs-Élysées, take a leisurely stroll and marvel at how much Parisians are willing to spend on clothes. Then treat yourself to some window shopping. It's free and you can still say you've shopped on one of the world's most famous avenues. Finally, no trip to Paris is complete without a stroll along the Seine. The river that runs through the heart of the city is lined with historic buildings, charming bookstores, and yes, more tourists. But should you take a river cruise? That's the real question. Pro tip: if you're into romantic sunsets and want to see the city from a different angle, go for it. Just know that every other tourist had the same idea. If you'd rather save your money, simply walk along the banks of the Seine. It's just as beautiful. And you'll feel slightly more authentic. Plus, you can easily opt from one famous site to the next without getting seasick. And if you do decide to cruise, make sure you sit on the upper deck. That way, you can pretend you're enjoying the views instead of dodging the occasional selfie stick. And hey, at least you can say you've seen Paris from the water. That counts for something, right? Montmartre, the historic artists' quarter of Paris, where the streets are cobblestone, the artists are pushy, and the souvenirs are overpriced. But hey, you didn't come all this way to leave without a caricature of yourself, did you? Pro tip: haggle. The artists might seem like they're offering you a deal, but trust me, there's always room for negotiation. And if you're not into having your likeness immortalized in cartoon form, simply wander around the winding streets. You might stumble upon a hidden cafe or a breathtaking view of the city. Just watch out for those charming pickpockets. And while you're in Montmartre, don't forget to visit the Sacré-Cœur Basilica. The views from the top are stunning and the basilica itself is a masterpiece. Plus, the climb up all those steps will give you the perfect excuse to indulge in an extra pastry later. You've earned it. The Paris metro. Efficient, affordable, and filled with more confusing lines than your last French exam. But don't worry, navigating the metro is easier than it looks. Sort of. Here's a tip. Download a metro map on your phone. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you get lost. Most Parisians are happy to point you in the right direction, even if they do so with a hint of smugness. And remember, always keep an eye on your belongings. The metro is a prime spot for pickpockets, especially when you're distracted by trying to pronounce Châtelet correctly. Feeling brave? Ride the metro during rush hour. It's a great way to experience Parisian life up close and personal. Just be prepared to stand your ground, literally. Seating is a luxury and personal space. Forget about it. Even after the fire, Notre-Dame remains one of Paris's most iconic landmarks. And yes, it's still worth a visit. The Gothic architecture is stunning, and the history even more so. Plus, it's one of the few places in Paris where you can genuinely feel like you have stepped back in time. Pro tip: arrive early to avoid the crowds. And if you're up for a challenge, climb the tower for a close-up look at the gargoyles and a panoramic view of the city. Just don't expect Quasimodo to greet you at the top. While you're there, take a moment to appreciate the ongoing restoration efforts. The resilience of this iconic structure is truly inspiring. And a good reminder that even in Paris, things don't always go as planned. But hey, that's part of the charm, right? If you're looking for something a little different, how about a leisurely stroll through Père Lachaise cemetery? It's the final resting place of some of the world's most famous figures, from Oscar Wilde to Jim Morrison. And yes, it's as eerie and fascinating as it sounds. Pro tip: pick up a map at the entrance to find the graves you're interested in. The cemetery is huge, and you could easily spend hours wandering around if you're not careful. And while it might seem morbid, visiting Père Lachaise is actually one of the most peaceful experiences you can have in Paris. Just be respectful. This is still a cemetery after all. And don't forget to leave a kiss on Oscar Wilde's tomb. In a symbolic way, of course. It's a tradition, and who are we to break tradition? Just make sure you have some sanitizer handy afterward. You never know where those lips have been. The Marais is the place to be if you're into boutique shopping, trendy cafes, and more art galleries than you can count. It's where Parisian chic meets bohemian charm, and where your wallet goes to die. Pro tip, don't try to do it all in one day. Le Marais is best enjoyed at a leisurely pace, with plenty of stops for coffee and people watching. And if you're not in the market for high-end fashion, there are plenty of vintage shops where you can find something unique without breaking the bank. Feeling adventurous? Wander into one of the lesser-known side streets and see what you find. Le Marais is full of hidden gems, from secret gardens to quirky bookstores. Just be prepared to get lost and maybe never want to leave. Finally, no trip to Paris is complete without a day trip to Versailles. The palace of Louis XIV is the epitome of opulence, and it's the perfect place to spend a day pretending you're royalty, or at least trying to understand how anyone could live in a place with so many rooms. Pro tip, buy your tickets in advance and arrive early to avoid the crowds. And don't skip the gardens. They're just as grand as the palace itself. If you're feeling particularly royal, rent a golf cart to explore the grounds. Because walking is for commoners, right? And if you really want to go all out, pack a picnic and enjoy it by the Grand Canal. Just don't forget to bring a bottle of wine. After all, what's a day at Versailles without a little bit of indulgence? Cheers to living like a king, if only for a day. And there you have it, your extended, sarcastic survival guide to Paris. Whether you're faking it as a local, dodging tourist traps, or just trying to find the perfect croissant, Paris has something for everyone. So, subscribe and drop a comment below with your most sarcastic travel tip. And remember, in the city of lights, it's all about seeing and being seen. So make sure you're doing it with style. Au revoir, travelers.